Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here, and in this video I would love to share with you how I draft these type of culottes. Now in my case I went for a short version, but you can go midi length or even full length. It's definitely totally up to you. And I often say that once you understand the basics, once you understand the principle of how something works, then you can take it and create whatever you would like. And that's exactly my hope for today, to explore with you the principle of drafting a culotte, and from there, sky's the limit. Now, I have oftentimes noticed that if we start with a geometric shape, it just makes it for a more logical and easier to understand process, at least for me. In fact, we have already done one culotte pattern draft on the channel. That time we used a rectangle, but this time we're going to be using a circle. Now, whether you start drafting your culottes from a rectangle or from a circle, they both share the same characteristics. One of them is that culottes have really long crotch extension. That's one of the reasons why when you look at culottes on the body, the front and the back kind of look like you're wearing a skirt. And that's the reason why a lot of times people will call them skirts. That long crotch extension is also responsible for a very particular fit of culottes, and that is that it sits away from the buttocks, which in return makes a very comfortable piece of clothing. So this is a great project for all skill levels, but also great for those who love the garments to look put together but still feel comfortable, like in my case. As you know, I'm not particularly into wearing skirts, but I feel that this strikes that really perfect balance. I'm going to unroll my pattern drafting paper and we're ready to start. We will need to have a couple of measurements, and first measurement is going to be our waist circumference. When measuring your waist circumference, which is a narrow area right around your belly button, if you have a piece of yarn or an elastic cord, go ahead and tie it around. You will find it useful for the next couple of steps. Now, my full waist circumference is 29 inches, and whether you're working in inches or in centimeters, the steps are going to be absolutely the same. For starters, I need half of this amount, so 29 divided in half is going to be 14 and a half. Now, the reason why I want only half of my waist circumference is because initially we're going to draft the back and the front pattern piece all as one, and therefore this measurement right over here equals to half of my waist circumference. Later on, if you would like, you can of course separate these pattern pieces into a separate front and separate back. Now, this right over here is a 90-degree angle, and that's what we're going to start working with. Now, since I'm taking a circle as my basic geometric shape and 90 degrees is a quarter of 360, right now we're going to be building a quarter of a circle where this curved line is going to be equal to half of my waist circumference plus a little bit for ease. Now, you can of course use mathematic formula for that. In my case, I simply find 14 and a half, and let's say I'm going to add about a quarter for ease, and then I do this, and then I mark it. From the top of the angle all the way down to my mark is about 9 inches, and that is what I'm going to use in order to build out a segment of a circle. Now, here's an interesting thing. The smaller is going to be the segment of the circle that you're going to take, the more it will resemble an A-line skirt. So if you do have an A-line skirt as a pattern that you love and that you have made before and you know that it fits great, you can also use that as a starting point for your culottes. And here is that curved line. Now, because I did use an approximate method instead of a formula, I am going to measure this curved line very carefully just to ensure that indeed it measures 14 and a half inches, which was half of my waist circumference, plus a quarter of an inch for ease. And it sure does. Now, if yours doesn't, let's say you need more, then you need to move this line a little bit lower. If you need less, then of course bring it a little closer. To ensure that your curved line is smooth and even all the way around, you can also bring the long ends together. Basically, you're dividing your 90-degree angle in half. And then you can see if you need to adjust. While we're at it, let's go ahead and determine the length of our garment. For that, take your measuring tape, place one end on your waist, and then drop it. From here, you can decide how long you want your culottes to be. For me, that is going to be 14 inches. Now we're going to use exactly the same principle to build out the second curved line, but instead of starting from here, we are going to start from our waist measurement. So place your measuring tape like so. This was that 45-degree angle line, and I am going to mark here 14 inches, like this. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing right over here and right over here. Now you can see that we have the waist and this is the hem. Before moving any further, I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. As you can see, it's starting to take shape. Next, we need to mark our body rise. This measurement is taken by sitting down straight on a very sturdy surface, and then take your ruler, place it on that sturdy surface, and then measure all the way up to your waist measurement. Once you have that, let's go ahead and mark it from the top here and from the top here. For this next step, I will need to add a little bit of paper on both sides, and we also need to determine where is going to be the front and where is the back. So let's say this is going to be front and this will be back. Now take your full hip circumference and divide it by 4, because from now on we're going to be working separately with the front and separately with the back. For me, quarter of my full hip circumference is 9.5 inches. So I want to take my measuring tape and I just want to double check from the point where we have marked body rise. I want to place my measuring tape, and here I see that this is my quarter of full hip circumference, and this is how much extra I have on the front, and the same is going to be here on the back. So I know that there's plenty of ease for movement and flare. Once I have double checked that, I want to take this measurement, 9.5 inches, and divide that in half. So for me, that's going to be 4 3/4. And I want to place this measurement on the front and on the back in exactly the same way, with a 90-degree angle starting at the point of a body rise that we have marked earlier. Now currently, both of these measurements are exactly the same. Now for the back, we want to extend it by 5/8 of an inch. And for the front, we want to decrease it by 5/8 of an inch. So let's get that done. Now I want to take my body rise measurement and divide that in half on both sides and then mark it. From here, do a 1 by 1 inch square on the front and the back, so that way we can easily find a 45-degree angle. For the back, you're going to do 1 3/4 inches. Let me outline that in color so that way you can see. And for the front, you're going to do exactly the same, but just 1.5 inches. For the back, we're going to connect this point, and this point with a really nice smooth curved line. And for the front, we're going to do exactly the same. From the edge of the crotch extension, go ahead and take a straight perpendicular line down, which is equal to this measurement. Once done, let's go ahead and extend the hem. I will repeat the same on the front pattern piece as well. Now, a kind reminder here to remember that there are so many ways how to do this or that in sewing and pattern drafting, and this is just one of the ways. This is the way that I prefer to do it, and it works really well in my case. But I always encourage you to take what works for you, and then as always, figure out the rest. For a better fit, you might want to bring down the front a little bit, let's say by 3/8 of an inch to get started with, and if needed, you can take it even lower, and then blend it in. In the back, you want to do the opposite. You want to bring it up, let's say by 5/8 of an inch or more, depending on a preference. Now, before I finalize the pattern with a waistband, pocket, and a zipper fly, I am going to do a quick little muslin. Now, I draft my patterns without seam allowances, so you will need to add your seam allowances as you cut your fabric, just like you see right over here. Alright, so I actually made a couple of different muslins to show you the flare when you're using a half a circle skirt versus when you're using a quarter of a circle skirt. So that way you can see the clear visual and the difference between one and the other. Now first I want to show you the difference between the pattern drafts. This is a half a circle skirt culotte, and this one is a quarter skirt culotte. You can see the difference in the flare, the top part, and the overall shape of the culottes. As for the muslin, this is a half a circle skirt muslin, the one that we drafted together. And this is a quarter of a skirt culotte. Now let's do a side-by-side comparison so that way you can see the difference. Now I personally like less flare in my culottes, so the ones that I made that you see right over here are quarter circle culottes. While I have my muslin on right now is a great time to mark the side seam, which should divide the side of my leg in half and should be a straight perpendicular line to the floor. Here you can also determine if you want your culottes to sit a little bit lower than your waist, and if so, go ahead and mark that. After that, I took my muslin off and I transferred the marking of the new side seam onto my pattern. Then I decided that I like how my culotte sits on me, but I would like for this top part to be a waistband. So I decided that I will go ahead and draft an 1.5 inch wide waistband from here to there. So I'm going to place 1.5 inch markings away, the same way that we did drafting this circle. And then I'm going to connect them. If you want to lower the placement of culottes on your body, you will follow exactly the same steps. From here I also drafted a zipper fly, which is just about 1.5 inches wide, and it ends right here where the curve of the crotch starts. Then if you'd like, you can separate your pattern at the side seam and then add a pocket. Now I do have multiple different pocket tutorials step by step about drafting and sewing them, so I will leave them in the description of this video so that way you can choose the one that you like. Now here on the back pattern piece, you might experience that the hem over here in the back pulls up a little bit. So when you stand, the hem doesn't look even, but instead it goes like this. That is because it takes more length of the fabric to travel over the curve of the buttocks in the back than it does to travel over the front. In this case, you might want to lower the hem in the back by 1 inch here and here, but then very slowly blend it into the side seam. However, it is going to make this part longer, and this part needs to match the front pattern piece. So if you extend it here by 1 inch, you're going to need to decrease it right over here. Now from here, this pattern is good to be used as is. If I were you though, I would sew up a very quick muslin just to double check a couple of things, like for example, placement of the side seam and the length of the hem on the back pattern piece. But other than that, it's good to go. Now, as always, of course, you can finagle with the fit a little bit more. We're not going to be discussing these adjustments in this video, but if you are a member of this channel, definitely tune in for the Members Extra Deep Dive for this particular garment, and I will show you a couple of adjustments that you might want to include. And of course, I'll give you extra tips and tricks about the construction and certain choices that I have made, so definitely tune in for your members perks. And if you're not sure what memberships are all about, then definitely check them out in the description of this video. And I want to thank you so much for being a member. It truly makes a big difference. Well, there you have it. The pattern is drafted, which was hopefully pretty easy and pretty straightforward. And now all we have to do is sew it up. Now the sewing part is going to be published next week. So if you're not a subscriber, definitely join in on the fun so that way you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. And meanwhile, if you want to see, let's say, how I made this blouse, definitely click right over here. It's going to be the second project in this video. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. I'll see you very soon. Bye!